There are moments in life that divide your existence into before and after, moments so profound that you can never go back to who you were before they happened. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday evening in March, 6 months pregnant, standing in our kitchen making dinner, when my husband walked up behind me and whispered in perfect, unaccented English, "We need to talk about something. I'm not deaf." I heard him clearly. That was the problem. Because for the 3 years I'd known him, 2 years of dating, 1 year of marriage, I had been speaking to him exclusively in sign language. Let me back up. My name is Sophie Chen, and I'm a sign language interpreter. It's not just my job, it's my passion. My younger brother Danny was born profoundly deaf, and watching him navigate a world not built for him made me want to be a bridge between the hearing and deaf communities. I got my certification at 22, started working at a hospital, and genuinely loved my work. There's something profound about being the voice for someone who needs to be heard, about facilitating communication that wouldn't otherwise happen. 3 years ago, I was interpreting at a tech conference. One of the keynote speakers was Ethan Wright, founder and CEO of a cybersecurity startup that had just been valued at $200 million. He was 31, brilliant, and, according to the program, a prominent member of the deaf community. His speech was about accessibility in technology and how his experience being deaf had shaped his approach to user interface design. I interpreted for the audience, and afterward he approached me. "Thank you for your work today," he signed. "Your interpreting was excellent, very natural." "Thank you," I signed back, a little flustered. He was handsome. Dark hair, intense blue eyes, the kind of presence that made you pay attention. "Your speech was inspiring." We talked for 20 minutes. He was funny, self-deprecating, asked thoughtful questions about my work. When he asked for my number in case he needed interpretation services for future events, I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was at a quiet restaurant where we could communicate easily. He was fluent in ASL, had been deaf since birth due to complications during delivery. He told me about growing up in the deaf community, attending a school for the deaf, the challenges of running a tech company when most of the business world wasn't equipped to communicate with him. I was fascinated and smitten. "Most people see my deafness as a limitation," he signed over dessert, "but you see it as just part of who I am. Not the only thing, not the most important thing, just one aspect." "Because that's what it is," I signed back. "You're a brilliant CEO who happens to be deaf, not a deaf person who happens to run a company." He smiled, and something in his expression made my heart skip. That was the beginning. Dating Ethan was unlike anything I had experienced. He was thoughtful, communicative, ironic, I know, and genuinely interested in building a life together. He introduced me to his friends in the deaf community, a vibrant, tight-knit group who welcomed me warmly once they saw I was fluent in ASL and respectful of their culture. I met his family, hearing parents who had learned sign language for him but were clearly uncomfortable with it, still grieving the normal son they'd expected. His younger sister, Melissa, was hearing and had a strained relationship with Ethan. They communicated, but barely, and she never bothered to sign when I was around, speaking directly to me and expecting me to interpret. "My family never really accepted my deafness," Ethan signed one night after a tense family dinner. "They love me, but they're always waiting for me to be fixed, like I'm broken." "You're not broken," I signed fiercely. "You're perfect exactly as you are." He pulled me close, and I felt his chest vibrate as he made a sound, the way some deaf people do when they're emotional. It broke my heart and filled it at the same time. His business was exploding. He had a team of about 30 people, and he'd made a point of hiring several deaf employees and ensuring the entire office was accessible. Meetings had interpreters, all announcements were visual, fire alarms had strobe lights. It was the most thoughtfully designed workspace I'd ever seen. "I built what I needed to exist in," he signed. "Why shouldn't everyone have that?" I fell in love with his mind first, then his heart, then all of him. After a year of dating, he proposed. We were at the beach. His idea of romance was bringing me to watch the sunset because he said, "It's something we can both experience exactly the same way. No sound required." He got down on one knee and signed, "You see me. Not my deafness, not my company, not what I can't hear. You see me. Will you marry me?" I said yes, obviously. The wedding was beautiful and completely bilingual. We had interpreters for the hearing guests and ensured deaf guests could fully participate. Ethan's friends from the deaf community were in the wedding party. My brother Danny, who'd grown up feeling like he never quite fit anywhere, told me it was the first wedding where he felt completely included. "Your husband is lucky, and you are too. You found someone who gets it." Our first year of marriage was genuinely happy. We had our own way of communicating, signing across rooms, texting when we were apart, watching TV with captions, and me occasionally signing dialogue that was captioned incorrectly. Ethan was affectionate in ways I hadn't expected. He'd come up behind me while I was working and put his hands over mine, feeling the vibrations of my typing. He'd wake me up by gently touching my face. We developed this entire language of touch that was independent of ASL. His business exploded. The company hit a $500 million valuation. He was on magazine covers, giving keynote speeches, being interviewed on major news networks, with interpreters, obviously. He became a face of disability advocacy, speaking about accessibility, representation, and the brilliance of the deaf community. And I was so proud of him. I supported his work completely. I went to events, networked with other partners of deaf individuals, advocated for accessibility in my own work. I was learning so much from being immersed in deaf culture, the humor, the directness, the beautiful visual nature of communication. Then I got pregnant. We'd been trying for 6 months. When I saw the positive test, I ran to Ethan's office, he worked from home most days, and signed the news with tears streaming down my face. He picked me up and spun me around, both of us crying and laughing. That night, we talked about what kind of parents we'd be, about raising a child who would grow up bilingual, English and ASL, about how it didn't matter if our baby was deaf or hearing, they'd be loved and supported either way. "I hope they're deaf," he signed honestly, "so they can be part of my world fully. But if they're hearing, that's okay too. They'll have you to bridge both worlds." It was such an open, vulnerable moment. I felt closer to him than ever. The pregnancy was smooth. We did all the classes, adapted for deaf parents, with visual instructions and interpreters. We prepared the nursery with visual monitors and lights. Ethan researched everything about being a deaf parent to potentially hearing children. At the 20-week ultrasound, we found out we were having a girl. "A daughter," Ethan signed, staring at the ultrasound image. "We're having a daughter." He was crying, I was crying, the ultrasound tech was crying. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The first strange thing happened at 26 weeks pregnant. I was in the nursery putting together the crib while listening to a podcast, True Crime, my guilty pleasure. I had headphones on because I didn't want to disturb Ethan, who was working in his office. I was so engrossed in the story that I didn't hear him come in. When I turned around, he was standing in the doorway with an expression I couldn't read. I pulled out my headphones. "Hey, you startled me," I signed. "What were you listening to?" he signed back. "Just a podcast, true crime stuff. Want to help with the crib?" He nodded, but seemed off for the rest of the day, distant. When I asked if something was wrong, he signed that work was stressful. I believed him. The second incident was at 25 weeks. We were at dinner with his business partner, Michael, and his wife, Jen. Michael knew some basic signs, but mostly I interpreted for the evening. At one point, Jen and I were talking about the baby, and she said something that made me laugh, a joke about pregnancy brain. I glanced at Ethan to see if he wanted me to interpret the joke, and I caught him mid-smile, already laughing before I'd signed anything. He caught my look and quickly adjusted his expression, signing, "What's funny?" I said, "Jen made a joke about pregnancy brain." He laughed again, but it felt performative, delayed. I pushed down the weird feeling. He probably saw Jen laughing and assumed it was funny, right? The third incident was at 26 weeks, and it couldn't be explained away. I was taking a bath, a rare moment of peace with my aching pregnant body, when I heard Ethan's phone ring in the bedroom. It rang and rang, vibrating too, of course, as his phone always did. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Ethan's voice. Not the textured, carefully modulated voice that deaf people sometimes have, a completely normal voice saying, "Yeah, I'll call you back in 10 minutes." I sat up so fast I splashed water everywhere. My heart was pounding. I must have heard wrong. I must have imagined it. Pregnancy hormones, exhaustion, stress. But I knew what I heard. I got out of the bath, wrapped a towel around me, and went to the bedroom. Ethan was sitting on the bed, looking at his phone. When he saw me, he smiled and signed, "Enjoy your bath?" "Did your phone ring?" I signed, watching his face carefully. "Yes, Michael. I'll call him back later." Did you answer it?" His expression didn't change. "No, I saw the visual alert. I'll call him back later."
Did you answer it? His expression didn't change. "No, I saw the visual alert. I'll call him back later." I stood there, dripping on the floor, studying the man I'd married, looking for any sign of deception. He looked back at me with those clear blue eyes, concerned. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I signed automatically. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine, because I was almost certain I'd heard him speak, fluently, naturally, without any of the speech patterns of someone who'd been deaf since birth. I tried to push it aside. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but the doubt had taken root, and it grew. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before, watching for inconsistencies, testing, in small ways that made me feel guilty even as I did them. I'd drop something behind him and watch to see if he turned. He never did. I'd play music at high volumes while he was in another room. No reaction. I'd call his name from behind him. Nothing. But then there were other moments, tiny things that didn't add up. Once, I was in the kitchen with the TV on in the living room, captioning playing. Ethan came down the stairs behind me. I hadn't heard him because I was focused on cooking, and made a comment in sign language about something the news anchor had just said. Something that had been said verbally, off script, not included in the captions. "How did you know that?" I signed. He looked confused. "It was captioned." "No, it wasn't. I was watching. The anchor ad-libbed that part." He barely hesitated. "I read her lips. She was on screen." "From upstairs? At that angle?" "Sophie, why are you interrogating me?" His signs were sharp, irritated. "I'm not. I'm going back to work." He left, and I stood there wondering if I was losing my mind. At 28 weeks pregnant, I did something I'm not proud of. I set a trap. Ethan was in his home office on a video call. I could see the closed door, see the light indicating his camera was on. I went upstairs to our bedroom, which was directly above his office, and I called his cell phone. I didn't expect him to answer, obviously. He never answered calls without seeing who it was first. He'd either let them go to voicemail or text back asking what was needed. But his phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I heard it, through the floor. His voice. "Hey, now's not a good time. Can I call you back?" My phone was still ringing in my hand. He'd answered a call he couldn't have known was from me, a call that should have only vibrated his phone, not actually been answered. Unless he could hear it ringing. I hung up, sat on the bed, put my hand on my pregnant belly, and tried to breathe through the panic. My husband could hear. My deaf husband could hear, which meant everything was a lie. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed to think, to plan, to understand the scope of what this meant. If he could hear, that meant he'd been lying to me for 3 years. He'd been lying to everyone, his employees, his community, the press. Our entire relationship was built on a massive deception. I'd learned an entire language, built my life around accessibility, oriented everything around his supposed deafness. His multi-million-dollar company was built on his identity as a deaf tech CEO. He'd committed fraud, both personal and professional. The weight of it was crushing.
I spent a week gathering evidence, recording his voice when he didn't know I was listening, documenting inconsistencies, building a case like I was preparing for court. Because I knew when I confronted him, he'd deny it. He'd gaslight me. He'd make me feel crazy. I needed proof. Finally, on a Tuesday evening when I was exactly 26 weeks and 4 days pregnant, I made dinner and set the scene. I turned on music, loud music, the kind of music that would be impossible to ignore if you could hear. Then I went to the living room where Ethan was reading and started signing to him. Normal conversation. How was your day? What should we name the baby? All the mundane stuff. He responded normally, completely ignoring the blaring music. Then I stopped signing mid-sentence and spoke out loud, over the music. Ethan, I know you can hear me. He kept looking at his book. Perfect performance. I walked over and tapped his shoulder. He looked up, signed, Sorry, I was absorbed in reading. Did you need something? I spoke again, louder this time. I know you've been lying to me. I know you can hear. He kept his face neutral, signing, I don't understand. What's wrong? So I pulled out my phone and played the recording. His voice, clear as day. Hey, now's not a good time. Can I call you back? I watched his face as the recording played, watched the exact moment he realized he was caught. His expression didn't change much, just a tiny tightening around his eyes, but I saw it. Sophie, he started to sign. No, I said out loud, not bothering to sign. You can hear me perfectly, so let's skip the performance. How long? How long have you been able to hear? For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, he spoke. In English, in that same voice I'd heard on the recording. Always. I have always been able to hear. I was never deaf. The room tilted. I sat down heavily on the couch, my hand automatically going to my belly. Why? I whispered. He sat down across from me, and for the first time in 3 years, he spoke to me in his real voice. No signing, just talking. I needed an angle. When I started the company, I was just another tech bro with an idea. Thousands of those. But a deaf tech CEO? That was a story. That got attention, investment, press. It made me different, special. You built your entire company on a lie? I built my company on my ideas. The deafness was just marketing. Marketing? I repeated, feeling nauseous. You learned sign language, joined the deaf community, became an advocate, all for marketing? At first, yes, but then I got in too deep. The community embraced me. I became a spokesperson. I couldn't just reveal that it was all fake without destroying everything I'd built. So you just kept lying? I had to. The company went public. We have investors, employees, deaf employees who look up to me. Revealing the truth would ruin everything. What about me? My voice cracked. What about our relationship, our marriage? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. I never meant to fall for you, but you were perfect, Sophie. You understood deaf culture. You could be part of the performance. Performance? I stood up. I wasn't part of a performance. I was your wife. I loved you. I learned ASL. I advocated for accessibility. I built our entire life around your supposed disability. I know. Do you? Do you know what it's like to find out that every single moment of our relationship was built on a lie? That when I thought we were having intimate conversations in our private language, you were actually hearing every English word I said out loud? That when I thought I was being sensitive to your needs, I was actually being played? It wasn't all a lie. Yes, it was, I shouted now, tears streaming down my face. Everything was a lie. The way we met, the way we communicated, the life we built, the baby we're having, all of it was based on me believing you were deaf. The baby is real, he said quietly. My love for you is real. Don't. I wiped my tears. Don't you dare tell me you love me. You don't lie to people you love for 3 years. You don't build a marriage on deception and call it love. Sophie, please, we can work through this. Work through this? Ethan, you committed fraud. Your company, your advocacy, your entire public persona is all fraud. Do you understand that? This isn't just our marriage falling apart. Your whole life is about to implode." He went pale. "You can't tell anyone." "I can't." I stared at him. "Are you serious right now? Please, think about what this would do. The employees who would lose their jobs, the deaf community who trusted me, the investors, the stockholders. What about what it did to me?" I asked. "What about the fact that you made me complicit in your lie? That everyone will think I knew? That I'm about to have a baby with a man who doesn't actually exist?" "I exist. I'm still me, just—" "No, you're not. I don't know who you are. I never did." I walked to the bedroom and started packing a bag. I left that night and went to my brother Danny's apartment. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask questions, just pulled me inside and let me cry. When I finally told him, signing and crying and barely making sense, I watched his face go through shock, disbelief, and finally fury. "He pretended to be deaf?" Denny signed, his hands sharp with anger. "He pretended to be one of us? For money?" "I'm so sorry," I signed back. "I brought him into the community. I vouched for him. Everyone trusted him because of me." "Stop. This isn't your fault. He lied to you too." But it felt like my fault. I was the one who'd introduced Ethan to deaf friends. I was the one who'd helped him network, who'd interpreted at events, who'd made him seem legitimate. And now I had to figure out what to do about it. Ethan called and texted constantly. "Please come home. We need to talk. Think about our daughter. Don't make any rash decisions." I blocked his number. Then his lawyer called. That's when I knew I was in real trouble. "Mrs. Wright, my client is very concerned about your state of mind. Given your pregnancy hormones and the stress you're under, he's worried you might say things that aren't true, things that could damage his reputation and company." "Are you seriously threatening me right now?" "Not threatening, simply advising that making false accusations could have legal consequences. Defamation, stock manipulation, fraud allegations, these are serious matters." I hung up and immediately called my own lawyer. I spent 2 weeks at Danny's apartment, trying to figure out my next move. I had evidence of Ethan's deception, but using it meant destroying a $500 million company, putting 30-plus employees out of work, including several deaf employees who'd found meaningful employment there, devastating the deaf community who would feel betrayed, causing my unborn daughter to grow up with a father who was either in prison for fraud or completely financially ruined, making myself a target for Ethan's wealthy, powerful lawyers. But staying silent meant living with the knowledge that I'd helped perpetuate a massive fraud, letting the deaf community continue being exploited, raising a child with a pathological liar, betraying everything I believed in. My mom, who I'd finally told the truth to, had her own opinion. "Sweetheart, that man lied to you. You don't owe him anything. Tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may." Danny disagreed. "The deaf community is going to be destroyed when this comes out. Every achievement Ethan claimed will be questioned. Every deaf CEO or entrepreneur will face additional skepticism. Is exposing him worth that cost?" My lawyer was pragmatic. "You have evidence of fraud, but you're also pregnant, vulnerable, and about to be in a custody battle with a very wealthy man. Think carefully about what you want your life to look like a year from now." I thought about it for days, weighed every option, considered every consequence. And then I made my decision. I contacted a journalist I trusted, a woman who'd done extensive reporting on disability rights and corporate fraud. I gave her everything: the recordings, the documented inconsistencies, the timeline of his deception. But I also gave her context about the deaf community, about how Ethan's fraud wasn't a reflection on actual deaf achievement, about how this was one con man exploiting disability for profit. The story broke on a Wednesday morning. Tech CEO's disability, a lie. Ethan Wright built $500 million company on false identity. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The stock price crashed, investors sued, the SEC launched an investigation, Ethan's board voted to remove him, his deaf employees, the ones he'd claimed to champion, held a press conference calling him a fraud and a disgrace. The deaf community's response was what I'd feared most. Rage, betrayal, and deep hurt that someone had stolen their identity for profit. But there was also resilience. Activists and leaders immediately pushed back on any narrative that this discredited actual deaf achievement. One hearing man pretending to be deaf doesn't erase the brilliance of actual deaf innovators, one community leader signed in a viral video. Don't let his fraud become our burden. My phone exploded. Reporters, porters, angry Ethan defenders, people who thought I knew all along. I had to change my number twice. Ethan's lawyers went on the attack. They claimed I'd always known that I was complicit, that I was only telling the story now because we were divorcing and I wanted money. But I had my own evidence. My texts to friends expressing confusion about inconsistencies, my brother's testimony that I'd been devastated by the discovery, my own recording showing when I found out. The truth was messy, but it was on my side. I was 36 weeks pregnant when I went into premature labor. The stress, my lawyer said, emotional trauma manifesting physically. Danny drove me to the hospital. I called my mom. And then, because he was still legally my husband and the father of my child, I called Ethan. He showed up at the hospital looking haggard. He'd aged 10 years since the story broke. His company was in bankruptcy proceedings. He was facing criminal charges. His face had become synonymous with fraud. "Sophie," he said when he saw me, not signing. We were past that now. "Thank you for calling me." "She's your daughter, too," I said, gritting my teeth through a contraction. Despite everything, she deserves to have both her parents here. The labor was long and difficult, 22 hours. And through all of it, Ethan was there. He held my hand, got me ice chips, whispered encouragement. It was surreal, experiencing this intimate moment with someone I no longer trusted, someone who'd destroyed my life, but who was still the father of my child. At 4:47 a.m., our daughter was born. 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect. "She's beautiful," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held her. "God, Sophie, she's so beautiful." I watched him with our daughter, this tiny, innocent person we'd created, and felt my heart break in a new way. Because despite everything he'd done, he was her father, and she would have to grow up knowing her dad was a fraud. "What are you going to tell her," I asked, "when she's old enough to Google you, to read about what you did?" "The truth," he said quietly, "that I made terrible choices, that I hurt people, that I hurt my mother." He looked at me, and that, despite all of it, she was the best thing I ever did. We named her Maya. It means illusion in Sanskrit, fitting given the circumstances. The divorce was finalized when Maya was 6 months old. I got primary custody, Ethan got supervised visitation, and had to pay substantial child support, though given his legal fees and bankruptcy, that wasn't worth as much as it should have been. He pled guilty to securities fraud and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, serving 18 months. During that time, Maya and I built a life without him. I went back to interpreting work, but eventually transitioned to advocacy. I started a foundation focused on authentic disability representation and preventing exploitation of disability communities. The deaf community was cautious at first. I was, after all, the woman who'd brought Ethan into their space. But over time, as they saw my genuine commitment to making amends, relationships began to heal. Danny helped me buy a small house. My mom moved nearby to help with Maya. I built a life that was mine, not built around someone else's lies. When Ethan got out of prison, he was a broken man. The tech genius was working retail. The multi-millionaire was living in a studio apartment. The disability advocate was a cautionary tale. But he showed up every week for his visitation with Maya. He read to her, played with her, told her stories. He was, in his way, trying to be a good father. "I can't undo what I did," he told me one day during a custody exchange. "I can't give you back the years I stole or repair the damage to the deaf community, but I'm trying to be a father Maya can be proud of someday." "Then actually be that person," I said. "Not another performance. Actually be honest.
actually be real. He nodded. I'm trying. I don't know if he believes me. Trust, once broken so completely, is almost impossible to rebuild. But for Maya's sake, I hope he means it. People ask me if I regret exposing Ethan, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I think about what life would have been like if I'd stayed silent. The answer is complicated. Do I regret that Maya will grow up knowing her father is a criminal? No, she deserves the truth. Do I regret the pain it caused the deaf community? Every day. But I also know that continuing the lie would have caused even more damage when the truth eventually came out, and it always comes out. Do I regret the 3 years I spent living in his manufactured reality? Of course, but those years also taught me something invaluable. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. When inconsistencies appear, don't explain them away. I learned that love isn't enough if it's built on lies, that good intentions don't excuse deception, that you can't protect someone from consequences they earned. I learned that sometimes doing the right thing feels terrible, that justice isn't always satisfying, that closure is a myth we tell ourselves. And I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, that I could rebuild, that I could survive having my entire reality shattered and come out the other side. Maya is 2 years old now. She's learning sign language, real sign language, from my brother and the deaf community members who've forgiven me enough to be in our lives. She's also learning English, growing up truly bilingual in a way that honors deaf culture without exploiting it. She asks about her daddy sometimes. Where Daddy? Daddy is at his house. You'll see him this weekend. Why Daddy not live here? Because Mommy and Daddy don't live together anymore, but we both love you very much. It's not a complete answer. Someday, when she's older, I'll tell her the whole story about how her dad pretended to be deaf,
About how I exposed him, about the choice I made to choose truth over comfort. And I hope she'll understand that sometimes love means doing the hard thing, the right thing, even when it destroys everything you've built. Ethan sent me a letter last month. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Dear Sophie, I've been in therapy for 18 months now. My therapist asked me to write letters to the people I hurt, not to send them necessarily, but to process what I did. But I decided you deserved to actually see this. I can't explain why I did what I did in a way that makes sense. I started lying for advantage and then couldn't stop. Every achievement was tainted. Every relationship was built on deception. I knew it was wrong, but I was addicted to the success, the recognition, the identity I'd created. Meeting you wasn't part of the plan. Falling in love with you wasn't supposed to happen. And when I realized I loved you, I should have told you the truth. Every day I didn't tell you made it worse, but I was too much of a coward to face losing you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that Maya is teaching me what love actually means. Not the performance version I gave you, but the real kind. The kind that shows up even when it's hard. The kind that tells the truth even when it costs everything. I'm trying to be the father she deserves. I know I'll never be the husband you deserved. But maybe, if I do this right, she won't grow up ashamed of me. Thank you for giving me the chance to try. Ethan. I folded the letter and put it away. I don't know if he means it. I don't know if he's capable of the kind of fundamental change he'd need to become trustworthy. But I know this. I did what I had to do. I chose truth over comfort. I chose justice over complicity. I chose to be a person my daughter can be proud of, even if it meant destroying the life I thought I had. And in the end, that's enough. To anyone who's ever discovered that the person they loved was a lie, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and it's not your fault. Pathological liars are masters of their craft. They create entire realities and make you doubt yourself when pieces don't fit. They gaslight you into thinking you're imagining things, seeing patterns where there are none, being paranoid. But your instincts are usually right. Those little inconsistencies, they matter. That voice telling you something is off? Listen to it. And if you discover you've been lied to about big things, about their fundamental identity, you have every right to blow up the lie. Even if it hurts, even if it costs you everything, even if people say you should have stayed quiet. The truth matters. Always. Not just for you, but for everyone else who was impacted by the lie. For the communities that were exploited. For the people who were deceived. You don't owe loyalty to someone who betrayed yours. You don't owe silence to someone who built their life on deception. You don't owe protection to someone who used you. Speak your truth. Let the consequences fall where they may, and rebuild something real from the ashes. That's what I did. And my daughter will grow up in a house built on honesty, even if that honesty is painful. She'll know that her mother chose truth over comfort. She'll learn that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it.